What's up, fellow gearheads? Today we're going to achieve a premium looking job on a peanut butter and jelly budget. We're going to make a hideous alternator bracket look good. We're going to install what looks like a high dollar premium dress up alternator and take kind of a unique approach to wiring said alternator. So if you've got a few minutes to hang out with me in the shop, stick around and see how you can turn the ordinary into extraordinary. What's up, YouTube, and welcome back to In The Shop TV. Today we are working on a 55 Chevy truck project again. We're forging ahead, trying really hard to get this thing wired and fired up as soon as possible. In the last episode, we got probably the most hated intake manifold installed on our LY6 6.0. If you didn't see that, make sure you go back one episode and check it out. All right, guys, let's get to today's project. So we've got this crusty, dusty, and gross truck alternator bracket that I'm trying my best right now to wire wheel and get all this white oxidation off. I'm gonna make an attempt to paint it, but before we do that, I wanna try something that I've not tried before in some kind of effort to get this oxidation from coming back. So I've wire wheeled it down best I can. I'm trying something new. I'm using a self-etching primer here that's actually a weld-through primer. I'm using this because it's incredibly zinc rich, and I'm hoping that will help stop some of this oxidation from coming back through the paint. So after looking at this for a little bit, I think this is more of a matte black finish that was in that can. It was the tractor paint called low gloss black. Kind of didn't know what it would look like, so I took a shot. But if you look at my accessory drive, the water pump pulley and the intake's got kind of a satin. So I think I'm gonna pull this back off and hit it with a coat of clear satin. All right, guys, really quick while that's drying, I just want to show you, you want to grind down any paint or anything that's on the mating surfaces for these brackets, specifically for the alternator, because that's how it gets its ground. And the same thing is true on the bracket itself. You want to kind of sand the paint off the back of it where those mounting holes meet up with those. Same thing down there in that spot on the block. I've seen that happen. A lot of people will actually buy alternator brackets that are powder coated. They look really nice. They go to mount everything up, put their alternator on there, and they got no ground. And it's because they're not making good contact. So always scrape a little bit of that paint off. Just make sure you're contacting metal to metal and you should be good to go. So I have our alternator here and I wanted an alternator that was black in color. Unfortunately for my engine, which is Gen 4, they went over to the 2-pin design instead of a 4-pin, and I cannot find a 2-pin alternator in black anywhere. With the exception of the really expensive high dollar stuff that I just didn't want to spend $400 or $500 on an alternator. So I got a standard replacement alternator for our engine, which is for a 2007 Silverado 2500 HD. So I'm crazy and I actually hand painted this thing, and I used the same type of stuff I used when I painted the frame on the truck. You can go back a couple episodes and check that out if you want, but it's a Rust-Oleum farm and implement paint. I thinned it down with mineral spirits and I added a catalyst or hardener to it to make it essentially like a 2K paint. When you're painting cast housings like this, it kind of soaks in a little bit too and forms a shell. And I don't know if you guys can see or not, but there's no brush strokes. And it is super hard. I mean, this is like a permanent coating. I cannot even scratch an indentation in that. It just really, really makes a great finish. So just like our alternator bracket, I made sure not to get paint on the part where we mount to the bracket so we can make good contact. And I've also removed the paint on the alternator bracket itself where those ears will make contact with it. And I don't know about you guys, but that satin black looks a whole lot better. All right, so I started working on putting together a charge wire here. I'm using some number 2 and some Tech Flex sleeving on it. If you guys want to see how I put these battery cables together, you can check out the battery video I have a couple videos back. I'll put a link for it in the description. So from the alternator, it comes under the intake, and I just have it ending right here in front of this head. It's not attached to anything, just kind of laying in this fuse terminal. I definitely want to fuse the alternator as close as I can to the alternator, and then we're going to run another number 2 wire eventually all the way back and directly charge the battery to it. But for right now, I don't have enough number 2 wire to do that. So what we're going to do is we're going to run it down the frame, inside the frame rail, and back to the distribution blocks that we have here on the other side. But before we make up that second cable, I definitely want to mount this on something. So I think I'm gonna have to make a bracket that maybe I can just screw to the head here or something like that, because I just don't want this floating around. I especially don't want it up against the head. We're real close to the header here too, and I could risk melting this or something. So just gotta get it mounted to something so it stays secure and away from the head and headers. All right, so we've got it set on a piece of angle wire here that I just kind of traced out the basic shape, and I'll go ahead and get this cut out as best I can. All right, so sparing you guys a bunch of cutting and grinding, I got these holes lined up pretty good for the bracket to the head, and to get these holes drilled out for the actual fuse block to the bracket. All right, so it looks like everything lines up good. I'm gonna get this cleaned up, sand it up a little bit more, throw some paint on it. All right, so let's take a look at our bracket, all painted up. That'll do nicely. All right, so I got my bolt started, and I got some fiber washers that I'm putting on the back side of this, just to see if I can stand this bracket off a tiny bit from the head and where the headers are to minimize heat transfer onto the bracket. Because that alternator fuse block is plastic, and if I can just try to keep a little bit of heat from it, I think it'd be helpful. All right, so we got it on. It was a bit more of a pain in the ass than I anticipated, only because the mounting ear on the water pump for the tensioner is kind of right where the bottom of that bolt is gonna be. I was fearing that going into this, but I was like, I got plenty of clearance to stick a wrench in there, which I guess I did. But in hindsight, if I would have thought this through a little bit better, I would have taken this bolt, ran it through backside, and tack welded it to the bottom of the bracket so that it would just always be in place, not have to worry about sticking a wrench back there and trying to fiddle the nut back there and all that good stuff. So whatever, it's in, looks good, I'm happy with it. All right, so our charge wire and our fuse is all done. I need to still hook up the little steam port that goes from head to head and then plumbs into the radiator. We've got to hook up our fuel line. This is just nothing. I just have this kind of sitting here to see what kind of angles I need. So I think we're gonna come off of that with a 90 and then maybe kind of strap it to the head a little bit right there and then come across to right here. And our cab body is gonna come on an angle like that. So maybe we'll use a 45 fitting on this. Underneath our alternator on the bracket that we just painted up, this is where our power steering pump goes. We've got to get that set up, press a pulley onto it, get some special lines that go from the Type 2 pump to a Mustang to rack and pinion. This is actually a Thunderbird rack and pinion, so we got to get some lines and fittings for that. I want to fire this thing up, and I'm actually wondering, maybe you guys can help me out with this. I don't really need to put the power steering pump on just yet, because for what? We're not going to be steering anything. We just want to test this engine and see if everything's good. Do you guys know what belt I would need for everything on this accessory drive? No air conditioning, obviously, minus power steering, just the alternator. If you guys know what belt I need for that, let me know. Leave it in the comments. I'd love to know. We also may need to relocate that idler pulley right there because it's awfully close to our throttle body. I don't know if we're going to clear when we come off of that with our elbow. It looks like it might, but it's going to be really close. If not, they sell a bracket that just moves this right down over here. When I fire this initially, I do want to hook up our cooling system because I just want to test everything in one shot and make sure that we're cooling. We still need plugs, wires, and coils. Then we need to hook up a harness. We'll kind of drape it over the side. We need also a pedal because this is drive-by wire, so we got to find a pedal for this and hook that up. Then I've got to pull out our computer, which is over there on the shelf, our ECU, and then I got to take the Tech M out of the bottom of this transmission and have all that flashed. Also, guys, as a lot of you asked, we have shirts. We have, I think, one t-shirt available, a hoodie. Go get yourself some t-shirts, get yourself a hoodie. It's got the logo on the back. Can't show you the back because then I can't see the camera. I priced them as low as I could. I think I only make like $2 a shirt. So help me out, it would help the channel out. It'll keep content like this coming and I'd really appreciate it. That's gonna do it for this one, guys. That's our alternator, that's our bracket. We still got a bunch of work to do, but we're getting really close to firing this thing up. Thank you all for being here so much. And until next time, I'll see you in the shop.